We're going to turn now to our reading, and Tim has asked me to read from Acts chapter 17. And I said that's okay because it's in the second half of Acts, and we only got halfway through, didn't we? So that's all right. I think I'm funny, but I'm probably not. Acts chapter 17, and reading from verse 17 to 34. Is that right? From 16 to 34, right? Okay. Now, while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols. And then so he reasoned in the synagogue with both the Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace, day by day, with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You're bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you're ignorant of the very thing that you worship. And this is what I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man, he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said. We are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead." When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. One of them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. May God add his blessing to the reading of his word.
The other thing to say is we have a staff prayer meeting every day. So you were prayed for on Friday, because we've talked about where we're going at the weekend, and then you'll be prayed for tomorrow when we report back. So if you want to send any prayer points, let me know, and I'll make sure that the staff in the Thurm office know. But also, the other connection I have, I guess, and followed a bit about the ministry here is I know Barry and Judy Grayburn well through Beach Missions. So I saw Judy a couple of weeks ago at a funeral service. So yeah, through Simon and Catherine, Barry and Judy, I've known about this church, but it is nice to be with you in person. And I've got a question to try and answer today, and it's this: how do we create and then cast vision? And I suppose I'm thinking about vision for global mission, but the same question applies to local ministry. So it applies to the church here, it applies to my church in Bristol, South Bristol, Philip Street Chapel. But how do we create and cast vision? And that's what we're going to try and answer, vision for global mission. And I don't know if you've come across these two companies. It depends on your age as to whether you know the one on the left, Blockbuster. But I don't know, back in, I don't know what the 80s, 90s maybe, if you wanted to hire videos, and I guess the younger generation don't even know what a video is, but you would go to Blockbuster, maybe on a Friday evening, choose your video, watch it, take it back the next day. So some of you can remember Blockbuster. But then the way to do it these days is Netflix or something similar. And so you subscribe to Netflix and you, stream or download, whatever you do, and you can watch your film that way. Now, back in the early days of Netflix, the two co-founders of Netflix, they went to Blockbuster and basically said, we've got this company that we're trying to set up, we're calling it Netflix. Would you be interested in buying it from us? You know, it's in its early stages, and you know, you're in this industry. Would you buy Netflix from us? We'll sell it to you for $50 million, which sounds a lot of money, but in business terms, it's probably not a huge amount of money. And Mark Randolph, who is one of the co-founders of Netflix, said that Blockbuster, the executive committee or whatever, they said they laughed us out of the room. In other words, Blockbuster were not interested in this Netflix business. I mean, what future is there in this streaming idea? It seems a crazy idea. And so Blockbuster said, thank you, but no thank you. And well, as they say, the rest is history. So Blockbuster, I don't think exists anywhere in the world now. It has gone bust. And Netflix is at least $150 billion industry these days. And simply, in business terms, the owners of Blockbuster didn't have a vision for the future. They didn't see the way things were going, and they were quite blinkered. They were just thinking about the here and now. And because they, in commercial teams, didn't have a sort of vision, then they, as a company, folded. But obviously that's in business terms. But I think the same principle as Christians, as churches, as a missionary organization, we need to have a vision for gospel work. And obviously that applies here locally and this community, but also globally. And so the question is, how do we create and cast vision? I am going to start off, this is not my outline, by the way, this is a bonus outline. In some ways, I'm saying I'm going to take this as a given. Any vision for gospel work starts off with a great vision for God himself. And so you see it in Isaiah chapter 6 as an example, where Isaiah, at the start of the chapter, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. And Isaiah just has a sense of God's holiness. No, holy, holy, holy. Has a sense of God's majesty. And really, he understands just something of the awesomeness of God himself. And so any vision for gospel work has to start off with just understanding the greatness of God and understanding that God has a heart for mission. We see it in places like Genesis 12, verse 3, where God says to Abraham, through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed, obviously thinking about the coming Messiah. But then in Isaiah chapter 6, having got a sense of God's glory, Isaiah then sees his own unworthiness. He says, woe is me, I am undone, I'm a man of unclean lips. and I live amongst a people of unclean lips. No, woe is me. He just sees his own sinfulness. And we're told that the angel took a coal from the altar and came and placed the altar on Isaiah's lips. And basically says, your sins are forgiven. Your sin has been atoned for. And so again, as part of this creating a vision, Isaiah understood not only the glory of God, but just how Christ has come and dealt with sin. And so having those two bits of the puzzle in place, God then says, who will go for us? Who shall I send? Who will go for us? And Isaiah, not quite knowing what God was going to ask him to do, volunteers and says, here am I, send me. And then he is told what to do, which is, I think if he'd been told that you'll go and people won't listen to you, he wouldn't have volunteered to start with. But he volunteers first and then is told what to do. But the idea is this. His heart for the people around him started with a great vision of God and just understanding his own sinfulness and that Christ had dealt with sin. So in some ways, that's all by way of introduction and is a given. So if that's not in place, what I say now about how to create vision falls apart. Does that make sense? But what we're going to do is look at Paul in Athens and see three, I think, ingredients or three things that give him vision for gospel work. So Paul is in Athens and he's waiting for Silas and Timothy to turn up. So they're on the second missionary journey. It's a long, you start about the end of chapter 15 into 16. They basically end up in Philippi. Then after Philippi, they go to Thessalonica and Berea. And there's a bit of agitation at Berea. So Silas and Timothy stay at Berea for a while, and they send Paul to Athens. And so Paul has arrived in Athens, waiting for Silas and Timothy to turn up. That's sort of the background to the story. And that's why we pick it up from Acts 17, verse 16. So three ingredients, three things that help us create vision. And as I share these three things, I'll give you one or two stories and, if you like stats, about to demonstrate it. The first is this. By the way, just to say this, before I went to Liverpool, I was given this book called A Vision for Missions, a chap called Tom Wells. And in that book, he says the missionary vision must begin with the vision of God. And then when you come to Paul, we'll look at these three ingredients in a second, but he too has the same vision of God, because when he preaches in Athens, he says, look, you don't know who you're worshipping, but I will proclaim him to you, the God who made heaven and earth, the God who made everything. So Paul, in his preaching, has a great view of God, the creator God. So again, that is driving Paul as the underpinning of everything else. But three things, and the first thing is this. It's seeing the need. So if you look at verse 16, now while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him as he saw that the city was full of idols. And I don't think it's just seeing idols as such. I think there's also seeing people who were enslaved to those idols, people who are thinking that these idols were going to do something for them. And I think if we want to create a vision for mission, whether it's locally or globally, it's just opening our eyes and seeing the need. I can remember being on beach missions, still involved in beach missions. This is back in 1988. And I was in Llandudno, North Wales. I don't know if you've ever been there, but the big hill called the Great Orme. One evening, Jim Taylor, who was leading that team, took me up to the top of the Great Orme. And it was nighttime because it was dark. And he said, Tim, what do you see? I can remember the conversation quite distinctly. He said, Tim, what do you see? Now, I could have said, and I would have been correct, I could have said, well, I can see the pier, and I can see the lights of the pier shining in the water, and I can trace the promenade, and I can see all the hotels along the promenade. And I would have been exactly right. That would have been the correct answer. But I knew that Jim was not asking me, what do you see, expecting that as an answer. He was getting me to understand, Tim, there's a town here with loads and loads of holidaymakers and locals who need the Lord. And that was a big lesson to me 37 years ago. It's the same principle. You read it in Matthew 9, where Jesus sees the people as sheep without a shepherd. It's the same principle in Luke 19, where Jesus weeps over Jerusalem. And I think we just need to learn to open our eyes to see the need around us. And when it comes to global mission, these are not meant to beat us up. But do you realize that 81.4% of people in this world do not even know another Christian or know a Christian? That's 4 out of every 5 people in the world don't know a Christian. And for a lot of those people, it's because there are no Christians to be known. There are big chunks of the world where there are very, very, very few Christians. And it's just opening eyes to the need. Or this is a church in Carcassonne. So this is France. It's an hour or two on a plane. If you want one good gospel-believing, gospel-preaching, Bible-believing church for every 10,000 people in France, we need another 4,000 churches in France. There's lots of encouragements in France at the moment, but still a massive need. So that's another thing. Or Central Asia. Now, I don't know how you define Central Asia. I generally define it as those countries that are impossible to pronounce and you have no idea where to put them on the map, especially the Stan countries. So you're talking from southern Russia down to, say, Pakistan, and from Turkey across to China, that area. And these are quite generous figures, but in that area, about 500 million people, of which 25%, probably less than that, are Bible-believing evangelical Christians. And some countries, it's much less than that. So the Uzbek people in Uzbekistan, so Stan means land of, so Uzbekistan, the land of the Uzbeks, it's 0.01%. And that's the need. And you can get cities the size of Birmingham, and there might be 20, 25 Christians in that place. So that's Central Asia. Again, it's just opening our eyes to the need. I do like numbers, and don't be bamboozled by the numbers in some ways. It's just seeing the need. So Spain, there were 8,000 just over officially recognized sort of designated areas. So it could be towns or villages or parts of cities. And of those 8,000, over 7,000 have no Bible-believing church unreached with the gospel. I don't know what you think of Cumbria. You maybe think Cumbria is a needy area, and it is. But Spain has those kind of numbers. Right, I'll explain this one. There's something called the unreached people groups. So that's where there are not enough Christians in that people group to reach the rest of that people group. That's basically the definition. So 40% of the world are in unreached people groups. That's 3.4 billion. And there's one missionary, basically, for every, so 4 missionaries for every 1 million of those unreached people groups. That's not a lot. So that's like taking the whole of Cumbria and saying you have 2 gospel workers for the whole of Cumbria. That's the need there is amongst the unreached people groups of the world. A couple more stats. The biggest unreached people groups, the Japanese, the Bengali Muslims in Bangladesh, the Turks in Turkey, and the Sheikh people in India. Millions of people, so I think it's about 135 million Bengali Muslims in Bangladesh, unreached with the gospel. So it's seeing the need, and I think Paul, he was seeing the need. His eyes were opened. He's going to Athens, and when you go to a foreign city or new city, I guess you want to see the sights, go to the taste the local cuisine, or whatever you do when you go to these cities. I don't think that was Paul's thinking particularly. He was just opening his eyes to see the need. But the second thing is he spotted the opportunity. Now, don't forget, Paul was here waiting for Silas and Timothy. And I don't know about you, but if I was Paul, this would be my thinking. I'd be thinking, hurry up, Silas, hurry up, Timothy. When you arrive, we can get on with stuff. That would be my kind of thing, thinking, I'm on my own here. There's a massive need. Let's just get on the next ship. And when you're here, we can think about planning a strategy and think about how to reach Athens. Paul didn't think that way. We're told that he went to 3 different places while he was waiting. So the first place he went to was the synagogue. So read that in verse 17. I guess it's a place he's familiar with, it's a comfortable environment for him. He's used to that context. But he went to the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews there. And then he thought, well, where else are there people? I know that the marketplace, there are bound to be people in the marketplace. And so he went to the marketplace with those who happened to be there. So he didn't know who he was going to speak to, but he was willing to go and thinking, well, there's going to be opportunity in the marketplace. Maybe he's thinking, I don't know quite what that will look like, but I will go and see the opportunity there. By which time, it was creating a bit of a stir because people were saying, no, who is this person? What is this babbler saying? He's preaching some strange doctrine about this Jesus and the resurrection from the dead. We want to hear more about this. And so they took him to the Areopagus, where they said, look, you just tell us, because we like these new ideas. We want to hear more. And so as well as making opportunities by going to the synagogue and to the marketplace, he then took opportunities that were presented to him. And when he was invited to go to the Areopagus, he said, yes, I'll go. And I think it's just not only seeing the need, but spotting opportunities, whatever that might be. And you know for your own community what that could be. I know for my community in South Bristol and Clevedon where I live. But also it's thinking about it for the world. So let me just share 1 or 2 stories. So this is Carrigtwohill in Southern Ireland. And it demonstrates the opportunity that a mission couple with UFM spotted. So this is in County Cork. And so Seth and Jessica are mission partners there. They're thinking, there's no gospel witness in Carrigtwohill. So what can we do? So Easter 2023, they thought, oh, we'll do an Easter egg hunt on Easter Saturday. And so they thought, okay, we'll plan that. How many children might turn up? Maybe 50 children, and obviously mums and dads as well. And so they got some goodie bags and various bits and pieces. But they realized as they were starting doing the event that more people were coming than they expected. So Jessica thought, okay, I need to pop down to the shops to get some more supplies for the people who've come more than we expected. She came back, having gone to the shop, and realized that in the time that she'd gone to the shops, even more people arrived. And so she went back to the supermarket or the shops 2 or 3 times because 300 children, plus mums and dads, turned up for the Easter egg hunt. And they were able to give away about 100 Bibles on that event. So when it came to Easter 24, which is worse weather, it's poorer weather, okay, they thought we were going to be a bit more prepared this time. And they were kind of, but 500 children turned up, and mums and dads. And then they thought, okay, so there's still no church here. What can we do next? And so Christmas had just gone. They thought, we'll do a Christmas carol service in the local community hall and see if people come in. And they found that people did come in. And that was encouraging. And then at the start of this year, sort of March time, they thought, we'll take a step of faith and start a new church. Now, this is the official launch, and so lots of Christians have come from lots of different places. But a handful, about a dozen people, have started this new church in Carrigtwohill. It's the first time there's ever been a church in that town, as far as we know, a Bible-believing church. And so they spotted the opportunity. And this is in Ireland, the least reached English-speaking country in the world. And it's, again, easy fight to get there. Or this one, this is in Uganda. And this is a holiday Bible club they held at Christmas. And 400 children turn up. And it's quite a small space that they're working, relatively speaking. And but this is by a couple called Bosco and Heidi. They started this church in Senga, which is just north of Kampala, 6 years ago. There were 15 of them who started the church in Bosco and Heidi's living room. And 6 years on, they're doing a holiday Bible club, and 400 turn up. They did the holiday Bible club just a week or so ago. Again, same kind of numbers. Now, the problem is, is it a problem? Currently, the church meet they start off in Bosco and Heidi's house, and then there are too many people to meet in the house, so they meet in the garden, and they've got a sort of big marquee on the side of the house. And what's happened in one year, from March last year to March this year, 35 people have been baptized in that church. And so regularly on a Sunday morning, 6 years ago, they get 200 people turning up every Sunday. And the church is currently meeting in their garden. And when they do a special, if they have a baptismal service, it might be 350 people turn up. And if you can imagine 350 people sort of coming to your garden for church and then wandering through your house, it puts a lot of strain on them. And so this is the church service. So they have actually bought a bit of land now, because the opportunity to grow that church and then use that church to launch out into other towns and villages around. So they bought this land, but they've got no church building at the moment. But they've seen the opportunity to teach. Uganda's a Christian country, but it's a lot of health and wealth, prosperity, gospel type things. So people are hearing the gospel for the first time. And pray for Bosco and Heidi, because they bought this piece of land, basically with their own money, and thinking, okay, it'd be good to have a building on it at some stage. But they've got no funds at the moment, but they're stepping out. They're seeing the opportunity. And every person who comes to the church, they do church lunches. Every extra person who comes to church costs them more money because they're paying for all the food. But there's the opportunities there. One more opportunity. This is in a country which is really tough to live anyway. In Southeast Asia, they've had an earthquake there recently. You probably work out which country it is. Under military rule. So this missionary couple that we have there, at Christmas, they said, let's do a meal and invite our friends, our neighbours, to this Christmas meal. 1,000 people turned up, okay? But if you get a big enough bowl of rice, I'm sure you can make that go to 1,000 people. But again, and each one heard the gospel was preached, each one received gospel literature. And this is in a country which is very difficult to live in and not easy to be a Christian in. But the idea is this: there are opportunities around the world. And I showed you earlier on, those 30 mission partners this year have just seen the opportunities that are to step out in faith. And I guess it's thinking about that locally. What opportunities can we create for ourselves, and what opportunities can we take when they are presented? But the third ingredient, I think, is the sense of urgency. So as the Apostle Paul is preaching, obviously he preaches Christ, his death and resurrection. But at the end, he says, God has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. In other words, Paul is saying, look, the gospel is the only hope that you have. And actually, you need to understand the urgency of it. And I think if we want to create a vision for gospel work, I think we need to be aware of this is the only hope for the world. We do have the answer, and people are dying in a lost world. So, for example, 2 people per second die in this world. I've known it's 11:45. So we started at 10:30, so 75 minutes. Well, that's too complicated maths. But 75 times 60 seconds, that's that's quite a lot. It's probably getting on for 10,000 people have died since we've been here. Okay, that's a lot of people, isn't it? So just a sense of people are lost, but also a sense of urgency in that we don't know how long we have to share the gospel. So Ernest was in this country doing some Bible training, and the church he was part of in this country said, no, and he had the vision for it, to go back to Zambia, which is where he's from originally, to do some church planting and theological training of other people. And so he joined I got to know him quite well. He joined the UFM mission family just over a year ago. And then he came back, so he went back to Zambia last August. And then he came back to the UK for a week in September just to do a bit more of his course. And on the Wednesday evening on the course, it was fine. They went out as a group on the Wednesday evening just for a walk. Wednesday night he went to bed. Thursday morning he did not wake up. And Ernest, tremendous potential, a godly man, taken from us, leaving a wife and 3 young children. But for him, he thought he had this great opportunity in front of him to preach the gospel, share the good news. But in God's purposes, he was taken from us. So the sense of urgency is we don't know how long other people have got, and we don't know how long we have. So as we think about a vision for mission, for global mission, it is driven by a view of God and his greatness, a view of what he has done for us in sending Jesus Christ to be our Saviour. But having that in place, I think it is seeing the need around us, opening our eyes to what our neighbours are doing and their needs and the schools or whatever it happens to be in our own community, seeing the need globally, spotting the opportunity, realising, yes, even if we're small, so Paul was on his own, even if we're small, there's opportunities that we can take, and praying, Lord, help me to step out in faith, even if it means going and serving cross-culturally, and then understanding that the gospel is the only hope for the world, and there is this sense of urgency. And so it's just, I'm applying it to global mission, but it applies to the ministry here. Just, Lord, give us a vision for gospel work, and that's what we pray globally and what we pray locally. I'll leave it there, and Dean, I'll hand back to you.